Welcome to the sixth lesson on the Nimzoindian. We'll look at the slightly more main system this time, f3. Recently there was a book by the Russian Grandmaster Yakovich who emphasized this system as a way of playing for white. And I must say I didn't study it really carefully, but I just read through it, and in the end his conclusion was that black is okay. And this was his repertoire choice for white, so I'm not so afraid here, but still black should know a little bit about how to put the pieces. There's a few tricks he should avoid, and then we get to the main positions, which is really worth discussing. First of all, there's moves like c5, which would be bad because of d5. This has been emphasized some places as a good way of playing for black, but I don't believe it. The general move is d5. White wants to play e4, and black should not allow it. So d5, and here white's move is a3. So after bishop takes on c3, bishop e7 is possible. It's been played a lot of times. Again, I don't recommend it. This is solid, it's good, and it's not boring, and certainly there's still chances to win for black. After take on c3, we have a position which could have arisen from the previous chapter on the same variation. Here again there's a little trick you should know, that castling here is bad because after c takes, knight takes, then e4 is very strong for white. Now black was looking for a transposition to the position we're getting into, but he won't get it. Therefore the right move in this position is c5. And when white takes on d5 and black takes with the knight, white cannot play e4, because after knight takes c3 he will be ready to defend the knight with c takes d4. We can have a look again here on this variation and say, well, can't he take with the queen? But we'll just show briefly that it does not work. Here, variations like this. This has been played sometimes. It's just very, very dangerous for black. I think this is the move knight e2, and then black has to play knight d5, and he's still walking on a very, very thin thread, and his queen is about to be trapped with bishop c1. So basically this is something which should be avoided. Therefore, in this position it's important to remember c5. Then white usually takes on d5. There's no other really sensible moves for him. Black takes back. We have all these arrows which we'll get rid of, and this is the main position. And here the main move is take on c5. But there's also other moves, and we'll just look quickly on queen d3. I have to say that though this f3 system is a main system, it's been recommended in a book, and there are a lot of gameplays with it, then in 10 years I haven't met it yet with black. And when I would meet it, I would suggest that 4 out of 5 times white would take on c5. Queen d3 is still a famous move because it was played by Shiev about 10 years ago. And he wrote some kind of obituary about the move, with b6 and bishop a6 being the refutation. And in Yakovich's book this is also what he recommends for black. But I talked to one of my friends who has played this system a few times, and now I just have to find my notes, and he played himself with the white pieces against Timman. His name is Tiger Hiller Persson. He played against Timman about a year and a half ago, this line. And he said afterwards that Timman played really well. So black simply allows white to establish this great center, but he has his own plan of counterattack on the light squares as always, maybe with the move f5 sometimes, where if white plays e5, then the d5 square would be available for the black pieces, and the c1 bishop would not be very active. Anyway, we'll just take the moves here. White plays f4 to develop the knight. Black plays b6. Comes queen e3 to avoid bishop a6. Black plays queen c7, just defending his pawn, developing at the same time. Knight f3, bishop b7, rook b1, rook comes to c8, bishop d3, and this move rook c8 might look a little different. Why not develop the knight? Yes, indeed so, but it's good to have this move in reserve still. Black was simply waiting for white to play his bishop from f1 to d3 with the cost of a move. So instead, black was playing rook c8, then moving the knight. So he had this bishop a6 as a reply to bishop d3. It's a fight for tempi, or whatever you want to call it. White chooses to exchange his best bishop and castles. Now black took, and queen d3, and here his position is fine, and it's not really possible to see how white should pose black any great problems. Strategic equality, you could call it. In a few moves, the players agree to draw. Anyway, as said, after the knight takes d5, the main move is by far. Here we can just give this equal. And then d takes c5 is by far the main move. Now comes queen a5. It's also the main move. f5 has been played a lot of times as well, and you can analyze a lot of things here. Almost everything is possible, but queen a5 is my suggestion. Comes e4. Queen takes c3 is known not to be very well here, and black has three main choices. It's basically moving the knight to anywhere where he won't lose it, which is probably a good idea. And in this position I have chosen to go with knight e7, which is also the main line. Now white plays bishop e3. The c5 pawn is somehow more important for him than the c3 pawn. Queen takes c3 is known not to be very good. This has been played sometimes. Take the queen, move the queen away, simply trying to regain the pawn. But now white has regained time. He has the two bishops. The pawn on c3 was in some ways just in his way. And now this endgame with queen d2 is known to be better for white and has been played really a lot of times. So instead of taking on c3, which looks tempting, black plays an equally tempting move, which is castling. Black is going to play against these pawns in the c file. In some positions he's going to play b6 if white is forced to take. We could imagine like now white plays queen b3 defending his pawn. This is not a move which can be played here, but basically the idea is that in this kind of pawn structure there's play against these two pawns, and at the same time there's the availability of these two squares a5 and c5 for the knights, and try to maybe, I don't know, get to c4 or something like this. Black will have a lot of play for pawn in many positions. However, b6 here would just be a big blunder, as white of course takes it. So in this position time has shown the queen c7 to be the main move, and now there's not really any move that promises white advantage. Many moves have been played many times. It will take a long time to go into all of them. One of them was rook b1. Here knight d7 is very natural. Black is threatening taking back his pawn. And one game continued, queen c4, knight e5. Queen has no good squares, go back, and knight d7. And this was played between Henkin and Oops. And basically this rook b1 move gives white no advantage. The only idea is it prevents this b6 pawn sacrifice and avoids this kind of position. But the move that I'm most afraid of for black here is a4. The idea is very simple now. After our next move, which is knight d7, white plays queen a3 and he can defend his pawn without being annoyed by the knights. Here it's a little difficult to get the pawn back. The move b6 somehow appeals to me, but actually the main point is here black has made a lot of developing moves and white has moved his pawns, his queen and then one bishop. Then first he played f3, then he played a3, then he took on d5, then he took on c5, then he played e4, then he played queen b3, then he played a4, then he played queen a3. There's not a lot of developing moves there. Of course some of the black pieces were forced to move twice as well. The bishop took on c3, the knight have moved 3 times, knight f6, knight d5, knight e7, the queen has moved 2 times, but still black is a little bit in a development lead. And here he plays f5, as I think is the best move. And the idea is to open down the f file for doing some kind of harassment of the white possibilities of castling. As long as the white king is in the center, black should be okay. And here knight h3 has been played a lot of times. Then take. And now the important point is to see that this square is of use. This is where the pieces should aim. So now comes knight g6, which also is a kind of prophylaxis. Black wants to find good squares for his pieces. At the same time, he also has the ability to see what is white's next move. White's next move would normally be bishop e2, kind of like to start knight f2 and then castling. But here black has a very strong move, knight h4. And suddenly white has a problem with the g2 pawn. And maybe the position is only equal, but certainly for white it's better to play a move like knight f2. And then there are different possibilities here. Knight e5 was played in one game. Bishop e2 and then knight f4. Bishop takes, castling, bishop d7. And in this position black is also already equal. This was played in a game between Golod and Makarichev in the Soviet Union 1990. The pawn on c5 now is weak. The bishop on e2 is not really playing, and the great advantage the white had was his dark squared bishop, and he had to part with it because black made this maneuver to f4 with the knight. So here white can struggle and keep equality, but he needs to play some very, very good moves. The game ended with a draw as far as I know. So knight f2, though tempting, is not really a great move either. Possibly the most challenging idea for black comes with bishop b5, knight d e5. And then a game which we have the name of here, Roschlau against Kersten, played in Germany 2002, continued with bishop f2, knight g4, bishop g3, e5. I'm not so sure about this e5 move, if it's good or not, but he played e5. He could have played knight g e5 as well. I'm sure there are many improvements. I'm just going to show this idea because I find it very fascinating. White castle queenside. It's certainly a shocker, but on the other hand, now he can use the f-file the other way. Before it was going one way, it was going towards us. Now it's going away from us, from white's point of view. And here black played knight e3, and white uses his pawn to great effect and enters the black position with rook d6. And I don't know, this position is kind of unclear. Black would like to take on g2, but there's a little problem here with a check, losing a piece for black. So I looked at this game and I didn't look at it very seriously because I'm certain that black is fine in many different ways. But a move I thought was very natural was king h8. And now white need to do something aggressive, otherwise he will just be much worse. So I looked at knight g5. This was the deep idea behind my move. There's no check anymore and I win a pawn. Or is it, I think I regain my pawn. But if we look at the white pawns, then we see that they're all isolated now. So if we play some kind of technical position at some point, it will probably end with a very good game for black. Now I found this move. Rook takes g6, which, when you look at it, seems like white will somehow try to get his queen, I don't know, somewhere here and mate. This is absolutely not going to happen. However, he has this idea, c6. And the idea is to attack the rook on f8. And after something like rook f6, comes queen c5. Now there's a direct threat of bishop takes e5. And white has some initiative. And black doesn't have time to develop his pieces from the queen side. Here knight f4 is forced to protect the pawn, and then white takes on b7. This is just it's not theory, it's just an example of how exciting the Nimzoindian can be, even though it starts with very simple moves. It's exciting, it's tactical, it's hard, it's critical, and even without having to memorize things from home, you can just play it and enjoy it. Here if black takes, then suddenly he has problem with his knight. There's a check threatening, and the position is just very, very good for white. So therefore black should play queen takes c5. White regains his queen. And then black plays queen takes c3. And the game would be immediately drawn. It's not possible to play king d1 because of rook d6 check. So something like king b1, queen b3, black back and forward, to do, and black will be fine. So anyway, let's just take the main pointers of this again. This is just a few things you need to know about this system to be able to play it until international level. And I don't think it's possible to out-prepare black. If white comes with some really well-prepared move, he will maybe be slightly better. And then you play. And he will have to use a lot of effort and time for this, and you cannot prepare everything. So this is a risk I'm willing to take, and I think most other people as well. On f3 we played d5 to fight for the e4 square. We part with our bishop because we played to b4 for a reason. Of course bishop e7 is theoretically a fine move, and here important castle. You have take and e4. So for that reason we play c5. Take with the knight. If we take with the pawn we get a rigid position. This is good for white. Well, we need a position where we can use our lead in development. Take on c5, now queen a5, and now the knight to e7. The main point is that it stays very flexible there, and the other knight is going to d7. So bishop e3, we don't take the pawn on c3, we have more important things to do, we castle. There's this b6 sacrifice in some lines. Queen b3, queen c7, this has proved to be the best move over time, preparing knight d7. And then after a4 and queen a3, which takes time but defends the pawn, we have won some time again, and we open for our pieces, and then we have all these interesting lines. Here certainly I think other moves than knight h3 can be played as well, but I have no doubt that black's fine. So anyway, this is what I think you need to know about the f3 system. It is basically all I know about the f3 system, and I'm not such a bad player.